Fournier. Oh, I apologize. Did I start early? Thank you very much for joining us here. My name is Thomas Johnson. I'm the Curator of Performance and Moving Image at Dunlop Art Gallery and RPL Film Theatre. I'd like to acknowledge that I'm a first-generation settler of Danish descent, currently living in Oaxaca, Kasataki, also known as Regina, located on Treaty 4 territory, the traditional territory of the Hayawak, Saulteaux, Lakota, Dakota, Nakota, and the homeland of the Métis. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to this discussion with Hazel Meyer and Lauren Fournier on the occasion of their two recent publications. We have Auto Theory as Feminist Practice in Writing and Criticism, and we also have Muscle Panic, a poster project facilitated by Hazel Meyer. These publications and our presenters share many intersections, which we're looking forward to exploring today. So produced by the support of the Canadian Sports Centre Saskatchewan and as part of Hazel Meyer's exhibition, Muscle Panic, at Dunlop Art Gallery from October to January, this poster project is the culmination of a collaboration between Shannon Comerford, Blair Fornwald, Whit Genoway, Ray Hesterman, and Jay Kovac. As part of this project, there's also an online non-archival archive featuring works of the participants, which I'll include in the chat. For anyone interested in a copy of the publication, please feel free to reach out to us here at Dunlop, and I'll also include our contact information. Lauren Fournier's new publication, Auto Theory as Feminist Practice in Art, Writing, and Criticism, published by MIT Press in 2020, is a comprehensive monograph that poses a real range of considerations for both artistic and literary auto theory, scholarship, and practice. Auto theory, the commingling of theory and philosophy with autobiography as a mode of critical artistic practice, is indebted to feminist writing and activism. And now it's my great pleasure to introduce Hazel and Lauren. Hazel Meyer is an artist who works with installation, performance, and text to investigate the relationship between sexuality, feminism, and material culture. Her work recovers the queer aesthetic, politics, and bodies often effaced within histories of infrastructure, athletics, and illness. Drawing on archival research, she designs immersive installations that bring various troublemakers, lesbian feminists, gender outlaws, leather dykes, into a performative space that centers desire, queerness, and sweat. Lauren Fournier is a writer and artist curator. Raised as a working-class white settler on Treaty 4 lands, Saskatchewan, she's currently based in Toronto. Her book, Auto Theory as Feminist Practice in Art, Writing, and Criticism, was recently published by the MIT Press, and her debut novella is forthcoming through Fiction Advocate in San Francisco. She teaches courses on visual concepts, artist writing, and auto theory and auto fiction at the Daniels Faculty of Architecture, Landscape, and Design at the University of Toronto. She's the director of Fermenting Feminism, an ongoing site-responsive curatorial experiment that takes place transnationally and engages fermentation, the process of microbial transformation, as both a metaphor and material practice. And her recent interview with Hazel Meyer, entitled What It's Like to Grow Up Poor, is available now through Public Parking Journal. Thank you very much for joining us, and I welcome you to this discussion.
Thank you so much, Thomas, and thank you to the Dunlop for hosting us today. I'm so glad to be here with Hazel, who I see as both a peer and collaborator and a close friend. So it's a treat also to be tuning in through the Dunlop and the Regina Public Library, obviously my hometown. But I am speaking to you today from San Francisco, so-called, which is the traditional territories of the Ohlone, the Muwekma, and the Ramaytush, and where I am currently working here as a settler.
Hi, Lauren. Hey, I too want to say thank you to the Dunlop for inviting us to do this, and thank you to Thomas. And I love that. I love thinking about a young Lauren at the Regina Public Library and just what you would have been looking for and doing. And yeah, I like that image in my head. I'm coming to this conversation from the stolen and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. And I just want to give a shout out to my favorite artist these days, who I'm so into, named Wes Harmon, whose project Potlatch Punks is just like keeps me going. If you don't know their work, they're a Carrier Nation artist, and check them out. Yeah. So with that, Lauren.
Yeah, Hazel. I'm aware that we're all, sort of these disembodied, in some ways placeless beings, and yet also hyper-placed right now in pandemic times. And, I'm curious to hear what your experience was like with this most recent iteration of Muscle Panic at the Dunlop, because my understanding of Muscle Panic, and maybe want to give a little bit of a context or a description of the work for those who aren't familiar, but I'm hoping those tuning in know a little bit about this ongoing project of yours. But my understanding of Muscle Panic has been that it really is predicated on bodies gathering together and sweating together in close physical proximity.
Yeah, exactly. All the things we can't and shouldn't do right now. Yeah, so Muscle Panic was at the Dunlop at the end of last year, and how the project looks in a gallery space is it looks like an installation that's really built off of a scaffold. It takes its inspiration from like kind of a structure called a universal gym, which you might have seen in the back of a consumer's distributing catalog when you were a kid, or these kinds of objects that you can do multiple kinds of exercises on. It kind of looks like a prop table sometimes. So Muscle Panic exists as this installation, and then I've always had the opportunity to do a performance with it, which is so integral to the work, because exactly it introduces these warm, sweaty, queer bodies into the space, into sort of this rarefied space of the white gallery. And so what pandemic life has done to the project is had me really sort of rethink, obviously, the performance part, and just kind of imagine another way to kind of get these bodies together. So the people that tend to perform with the performance, they are they're folks who have some sort of physical practice, and I've always been really, really open as to what that means, whether that's just like a daily stretching routine or I've never really looked for virtuosity. I've never actually worked with professional or amateur athletes. Working on the poster was the first time that I had actually worked with professional athletes. And I call them that, though to themselves, they're amateur athletes because they went to the Olympics, in which you can't be a professional athlete. And I won't get into that. It's like interesting and not interesting, but that was quite wild. And yeah, so trying to think about how to, sort of evoke and almost conjure the sort of high that is being around other warm bodies doing somewhat absurd, somewhat practical prompts and movements and actions. And yeah, I hope I'm like, did I explain Muscle Panic well enough? I guess just like, because this is something Lauren and I talk about quite a bit, but like the real premise of the project is to kind of reimagine a queer history of sports and of various things that go along with that. Sweat, holes, all that stuff. So, so installation, and then I got to work with 5 folks, and Thomas already mentioned their names, but I'm going to mention them again because they were very, what's the best way to describe it? They were so open and patient with me. I really, the work I did with them went through so many iterations and changed so many times through, over the, I guess it was 4 months I was working with them. So those folks are Shannon Comerford, Blair Fornwald, Whit Genoway, Ray Hesterman, and Jay Kovach. And yeah, they were just so patient. So in the end, what I ended up doing with them was giving them a prompt. And that prompt is a prompt I sort of used for myself for a sister project to Muscle Panic, which is called Non-Archival Archive. So the prompt I gave them is, what do the greatest moments in sporting history look like to you? And these are all folks that identify along the LGBTQ 2S plus, sorry, you know, along that sort of like undulating mass that is one's identity. And I've asked myself that before and kind of imagined a world outside of ESPN in which, you know, the greatest moments, like we really sort of reimagine what greatness is, right? Maybe more from a bottom-up place. And so all these folks engaged with that prompt. They sent me 5 or more images of what these moments would be to them, using whatever kind of structure parameters to kind of define those things. And then I asked them for each image to give me some alt text to sort of visually describe what these images are. And part of my thinking with that was, for myself, I'm trying to be more sort of conscientious about various accessibility methods. And so that's something I'm thinking about. And then also, it's a nice way to spend time with an image. And I kind of wanted, I think it's easy to kind of pass along someone a JPEG that you found online, but then to actually have to sit and take a few minutes to actually, you know, with words describe what's going on, felt sort of meaningful. And then what I was able to do was create, you know, I don't know what it's called, a poem with parts of their alt text, with parts of their like, their descriptions. Yeah, and Lauren, can you see this okay? Would you read it out loud?
Yeah, I have it pulled up larger here on my computer, so
Okay.
I'll read it, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I'll keep holding it.
Pulled up into a loose ponytail, she wears a black leotard which fastens over her white skates with stirrups. Worn down rubber along the outsole. A fencing foil in one hand and the other hand clenched in a fist. 2 black knee braces, not fancy, in the pool with their water polo caps on. They look like they could click their heels if not for the skis attached to their feet.
Thank you.
Thank you for writing that.
Oh, my pleasure. And a big shout out to my partner, Kate McKinney, who really helped me with that. I was having a real moment, and I'm lucky to have a partner who can who understands my blockages. And I'll just show you all quickly. This is the other side of the poster. And this is a blown up image of the Muscle Panic Handbook. It was sort of, it isn't the sort of original Muscle Panic Handbook. I kind of really did make it for this image, but in it are a bunch of prompts that the performers use while being a part of the performance. And the ones I chose for the poster in particular, I thought were kind of meaningful to this moment in the world, such as taking a knee. We could think of lots of folks like Colin Kaepernick, and hug, which is something maybe a lot of us can't do if we haven't got a bubble, and just, you know, sort of ways of being intimate with one another that we can and can't do right now, but perhaps are a bit future looking, which I know is hard right now, or at least I'm finding it hard. But yeah, I thought this poster could kind of be a bit future oriented.
That's great. Yeah, kind of like proximate or vicarious, like intimacies and solidarities in this transitional time.
Yeah, totally, exactly.
Yeah, it's funny you're talking about the ESPN, and it made me think of your piece that's riffing on the ABC Wide World of Sports, which is one of the first pieces. I know when we did our first studio visit together back in like 2016-ish, and we talk a little bit about this in our recent interview in Public Parking Journal, which I would encourage folks to read if they're interested, where we get into thinking about class and ideas of being kind of low-income kids in the context of the contemporary art world that tends to be quite at the very least middle class. But yeah, so for those who don't know, Hazel reimagined the ABC Wide World of Sports logo as the Wide World of Holes, and you have the quintessential butthole image that is also Hazel's avatar persona on social media and Instagram. I hope I'm not like outing.
Oh no, it's good.
If people didn't know what they were looking at, that is what you're looking at. And so, yeah, I know, in our initial conversations, we were thinking about holes. We were thinking about this idea, as you put it in the public parking interview, is a hole just potential? I guess I should also note a little bit more context too, and I'll mention my auto theory book that you also have work featured in, that back in 2017, so the text that I just read of Hazel's, there it is. Thanks, Hazel. So the poetry / drawing / auto theoretical riffing text, if we want to call it that's included on your poster that you just did for the Dunlop. You've been working in that mode for a while in terms of the series of your quite iconic hand-drawn or hand-scrawled texts. And so, yeah, back in 2017, the first exhibition I ever curated at Saluki Contemporary in Toronto featured some of those works alongside other drawings of yours, which included, do you mind pulling up the Powers of Horror image?
We're doing an analog slide presentation.
This is our screen share. And so this is a piece that was included in that exhibition alongside some of these texts, like the one in Hazel's work. So it reads, Powers of Horror. For those of you who've taken, a literary theory class, art theory class, you might recognize that title from the French psychoanalytic feminist thinker Julia Kristeva's piece, Powers of Horror, which is her famous essay on the idea of abjection, or the abject, which is ideas that Hazel's certainly explored in her work, thinking about experiences with, Crohn's, IBS, bowels and guts and excess and the limits of the body, the limits, where does my body end and another body begin? All these ideas are wrapped up in that theory of the abject. So I was seeing this work, it was, early days of thinking about this idea of auto theory, which, as Thomas noted, is really just this bridging of autobiography or subjective or otherwise embodied modes with theory and philosophy. So whether it's something as literal, as this kind of movement between your autobiographical experiences with chronic illness in relation to Julia Kristeva's work, or something, or do you mind holding up the cover again? So another artist who's actually in that exhibition at Saluki Contemporary is Sona Safai, who's a really incredible Iranian conceptual artist, currently based in Toronto. Shout out to Sona. And this is a work of hers that was, the actual sculpture was included in that exhibition just across from Hazel's works that were on the wall. And now an image of it is included on the book cover. For those of you who can't see the image super clearly, it's essentially riffing on the model of the Louis Vuitton bag, very 2000s cultural capital status object symbol. And what Sona's done is she's created her own brandscape using the names of theorists and artists that she tended to have to read and cite over and over when she was in graduate school at OCAD in the kind of late 2000s. So you have folks like Deleuze and Guattari, Nicolas Bourriaud of relational aesthetics, Roland Barthes, Death of the Author, even Andrea Fraser's kind of a random one in their institutional critique. So yeah, you have this representation of a certain mode of theory and philosophy as it manifests in grad school and in art school, which brings us to Hazel's other iconic works. So many iconic works, Hazel, but No Theory, No Cry. This has even been tattooed on other artists' bodies.
Yeah, it has. That's true.
And so this is a great image.
There we go.
I think it's a great image. No Theory, No Cry. Hazel, would you want to talk at all about this work, or how you kind of feel about this work revisiting it? Because I see this as similar to Sona creating this brandscape based on her time in grad school in Toronto in a certain kind of moment in time.
Yeah.
Your work's quite similar, but it takes a different direction, like, wanting space for affect and the body in those spaces of reading and study.
Yeah. So I made that piece in 2008, and that was my first year at OCAD also in their MFA program. And I had been out of school for close to 10 years, I think, between my BFA and MFA. So had really gotten comfortable reading and understanding texts in a way that was like meaningful to myself and to my practice, and going back to school in a program that it was the first year of the program, and I felt they were trying to figure out their place in the wider world of the MFA industrial complex. And there was, moment after moment of really being pushed to sort of understand text in a very specific way, which is fine if perhaps I was in another kind of program, but being in an MFA, I felt as though I should be able to, sort of engage with works as I needed. And, but, the work, No Theory, No Cry, I think sometimes it's understood as like sort of a one-way relationship or understanding with theory, which isn't a positive one, but it really, really like is meant to be, I think No Theory, No Cry, I always like to conjure the image of theory being like a little baby that you're sort of holding in your arms, and you're like, oh, no theory, no cry. No cry, because it's something that's like very dear and tender to me. I love ideas. I love words. I love, it's so meaningful to me. And I think, that's like, I think one part of the work that I'm always sort of want to kind of like wave the flag for, that like it's about like a really dualistic kind of relationship with this thing, and just like a really embodied understanding and experience of words and reading and ideas and all that. Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm glad you mentioned that, because it's not just about critique. It's, as you said, like it's an embodied understanding. And I feel like that's really the case with so many of the works in the auto theory book too. Like I think about Adrian Piper engaging with Kant's work back in the early 1970s. Like you have these various moments where artists are often kind of really like wrestling with these ideas and languages and frameworks and discourses, and some critique might emerge from that and some criticisms, but it isn't just about a kind of straightforward disparaging of it necessarily, that there is this kind of more affirming critique, or as you said, like a desire to just have the body there and present and thinking, rather than pretending that the mind-body split exists and we can kind of become disembodied as we're like reading, for example.
Yeah, totally. And this kind of, this is definitely a tangent, but it does all connect, I promise. But this is all just reminding me of that show of yours at Saluki Contemporary. And I was there, I can't remember which day, and you were working on the install. And it was like the first time you used a power drill. And that's just like, it was such a gorgeous moment to be able to experience this like very capable, amazing individual, just like getting to experience like the pleasure and power and that is a power tool. And I think given the tenor of so much of that work, it was like really nice to kind of have this like, to be able to see this very like, this moment of like, I don't know, just like tool know-how.
It's a good funny memory for sure.
Yeah.
No, thank you, Hazel. I appreciate that. No, it's true. I mean, I feel like I can't think of a drill or a power tool or even just the word tool without thinking of you in the best way. I'm not calling you a tool. No, but just thinking about toolboxes. But just the like pegboard and with the tools and yours and Kate's collaborations at the CLGA archives. And yeah, I just lots of kind of fond memories of you and your work with tools too. So I'm glad to be part of that personal archive.
Yeah, totally. You totally are. All right. Where should we go next? Shall we talk about the article?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, because I kind of leapt forward mentioning this idea of holes, but we didn't dive in.
Well, yeah. So actually, the first time we met, which was, what was that, 2016 in my studio. And I remember walking away from that just feeling so elated and so just like overjoyed and, you know, taken care of even in that moment. But we spoke quite a bit and quite at length about holes, along with, that was sort of my takeaway, along with kind of this mutual kind of appreciation of like growing up poor and or working class and sort of like how one carries that as they move along in this sort of like contemporary art world, and you know, and what it means and how it sort of still continues to mean things to myself, and I'm, you know, I think you as well. But yeah, so it was like this kind of like beautiful mesh of like this very bodily appreciation of holes, like holes for pleasure, holes for pain, holes. You know, we kind of take this up again in the interview we did, just like the kind of potentiality of holes, which then connects to this little thing, which, yeah, you just like had this great brainwave when we were talking about holes and you remembered this book.
Yeah, so for those audience members out there, Hazel and I will be starting a fan club for this book, so feel free to leave comments in the chat if you want to be on that mailing list. But yeah, so this is a book, this was my favorite book growing up. I don't know why, but I just know for a fact that it was my favorite book as a kind of, yeah, like pre-teen child. So it was published in 1998, so I guess I was 9, by Louise Satcher. And I know it was remade as a movie adaptation. I've never actually seen the movie. I think there's something that I just want to keep kind of holy about the experience of that book. So, but yes, I was thinking about the idea. It's been a while since I've read it. Hazel, in a quite beautiful gesture, read it in the time since our interview and before this conversation. I do want to find a copy, but what I remember is that there's just this kind of repetitive act of digging holes in the context of this child kind of juvenile detention facilities, you know.
Yeah.
Politics of prisons and the prison industrial complex kind of aside for now. I'd be very curious to reread the book with all those politics in mind. But I think as a kid, I don't know if there's something just calming, maybe especially growing up in the prairies, just the idea of this kind of repetitive act of just digging into the earth, and there being something about this kind of unthinking, essentially just physical labor. I am quite curious on a psychoanalytic level what it was about that book that really resonated with me, though I don't have the sense that I'm alone. I know a few people have been commenting. I'm sure there's like a lot of 90s kids out there who read the book because it came out and seemed to get quite a bit of buzz. But yeah, this idea of holes, and then even just the idea of, you know, young adult literature as a genre. I think you and I are both pretty interested in thinking about, if you and I are both going back in time, reflecting on our upbringings in relation to our present day practices. I should add too that I had no idea you were from, you know, a low income, poor and or working class background when we met for a studio visit, nor did you know that about me. And it was something that just kind of came up organically. And I think I also left that studio visit feeling really elated, and feeling just a real sense of kinship with you, and the sense that these forms of kind of class-based marginalization aren't always really talked about openly, as Mackenzie Work put in my recent conversation with her for the MIT Press podcast about the auto theory book. She was like, money is the last taboo, class is kind of this last taboo, whether or not people agree with that. But she was being somewhat provocative, but just this idea that there are certain things that we still are really kind of antsy to talk about, especially in a kind of white bourgeois, waspy context.
Yeah, definitely. And when we did the interview for Public Parking Journal, I had just finished, well, I guess a few months before, a project, I guess you could call it, I guess it was a show at Western Front, and I made a work that actually had its start in 2009, when I was at OCAD, after I had actually just made No Theory, No Cry. I had come up with sort of language that I wanted on another banner. And that language was what it means to grow up poor spelled P-O-U-R. And I came up with the language, and I just remember I couldn't bring myself to make the banner. And part of that might have been not wanting to deal with the kind of critique that would have come in that space, or not trusting the space, or I think part of it too is it just had to sit with me for a while, and it had to ferment, and I laugh while saying that because Lauren and I were just talking about fermentation, and fermentation's a huge part of your sort of conceptual but also practical practice, Lauren. But yeah, that language just really had to stay with me and sit with me, and it finally sort of came into the world a few years ago during a performance that Lauren saw, and we spoke about it, and that definitely helped me move forward with the work. And so that piece now actually exists. It looks like Joyce Whelan's, I think it's 1968 or 1969 piece called Reason Over Passion. So if anybody knows what that piece looks like, it's a giant sort of quilt-like wall hanging with puffy hearts and puffy words, and the language of her work being based on Pierre Trudeau, something Pierre Trudeau said. I guess I'm just tangenting here, but it just kind of reminds me of, everything.
Yeah, no, you're not tangenting at all. Yeah, no, because the performance I saw was at TMAC, so Toronto Media Arts Center, and it was a big part of Hazel's ongoing, we call it kind of intervention, but I don't know if that's the right, working alongside Joyce Whelan and her work in her archive, and kind of thinking through it through your own embodied present day reflections.
Yeah.
And so you invoked the work, what it means to grow up poor, as an utterance in that performance, and then making it as the banner for Western Front.
Yeah, nicely put, an utterance. Totally. In my mind at the time, I was like, okay, if I put this into the world, I either never have to make the banner because it already exists as an idea, or I'll be accountable to putting it out in the world. And in some ways, I think after Lauren and I, after we spoke, and you had said that it was, meaningful to you, that was very meaningful to me to hear. And I was like, okay, this, I think this needs to be in the world, I think it's time. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe there's something there for us to reflect on in terms of this idea, because I know, this idea of fermentation, I guess we've also worked together on that project. That's funny. We worked together in a lot of different ways. You've had work in the Fermenting Feminism project, this ongoing curatorial experiment, thinking about fermentation, which is most simply the transformative action of microbes, which includes bacteria, yeast, fungi. And so think about it both in a metaphorical sense, where fermentation is simultaneously preservation and transformation, and then thinking about it in this material practical sense of, literally having sauerkraut fermenting in a crock in your kitchen, or making kombucha, or keeping a sourdough starter alive. So these different haptic and material and edible practices.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking about this idea of like taking that, like some work requires, well, I mean, all work requires time, but this idea of you having to have time to actually sit and allow the work to ferment. I know that was similar with my experience writing the auto theory book. It was funny being like, oh yeah, books take many years, and much kind of time and if we want to think about it in kind of birth metaphor of like gestating, but also I kind of like the idea of fermenting. And it's funny too, because I'll admit that there's parts of the book that I'm like, I feel like it would be tonally different if I wrote this after the pandemic. Like there's something about looking at the before times, and maybe we can weave this into a larger conversation about your next directions for Muscle Panic and other work. And then I'd be curious, maybe we can just talk about future directions of where our thinking is going. But I don't know, there's something interesting where I finished writing the book in, before 2019, which was kind of submitted. And then 2020 happens, and then we're all, I guess I can't speak for all of us. I can speak for myself, saying that there's been, substantial shifts in the way I'm thinking and prioritizing, and just kind of general sense of perspective on things. And so when I read the book now, I'm like, oh yeah, there are these kind of like, there are some things I would do differently and tonal shifts. And it's one of those things that ultimately you have to choose a time to put the work out in the world. And it's never going to be and kind of the ideal and that exists, the impossible ideal in your brain or something, but that it's like a text amongst other texts, or a work amongst other works.
And you're like putting it out there so that people can start, grabbing kraut from the crock. The crock being your book, the kraut being your ideas. But just think about it. When you go into your second printing, you can just like, acknowledge all this in your forward. The work's never done. Yeah.
I love the crock metaphor. That's great.
It feels so real though, huh? Yeah, it's such a good one. I know I've never sort of complicated the thinking around it, but very much I've always thought about like the process of just thinking through ideas as digestive. It just like it makes so much sense, and it feels so right. And just thinking about it right now, maybe what it means to grow up poor was like a poppy seed. Sometimes like the seeds get stuck in the sort of the folds of your intestine. And it just got stuck, and it just needed like 10 years or longer, to find its way out. Yeah. Tracer foods, right?
Yeah. I feel like we can go very deep into this metaphor of guts and fermentation. I love it because it's like, how does it get unstuck? Okay, you have the fermented, prebiotics and probiotics. Jay, this is my pseudoscience talk here, but that's great. Do you see like your next, like, do you have a sense of future directions for Muscle Panic? Does this mark a kind of conclusion of the project? Do you feel like, I mean, no pressure if you don't.
No, I'm happy to. The project right now is in Copenhagen at Copenhagen Contemporary, and there's a show called The Art of Sport. So it is there amongst other works. And this was the second time I've had to install it without being there, which is, I feel like a work unto itself. It was so challenging because the project in the past, I've always been there to set it up, and it's always been very responsive, and it generally would take a week, and it's like very enjoyable for me. But it's, I think it was Kate, my partner, a few weeks ago, that we were just thinking about what we've actually gotten done in the last while. And they reminded me, they were like, oh, you figured out a way to communicate how to have this project set up. And that's no small chicken. And it was really nice to be reminded of that. So that feels good. But sorry, all that to say,
that's kind of like directing, hey, and choreographing from afar in a way, because I think it's worth mentioning, like Muscle Panic. I've always seen it fundamentally as like a performance, that it right in terms of bodies in space and time. So this idea of kind of giving the community, like yes, you're communicating kind of curatorial instructions from afar, but there's something about this idea of you actually sort of directing or choreographing or
yeah. And I'm like looking at the documents that I've created for the people installing it, and I was like, oh, there's something there that I like also. And I've only thought of this very briefly a few times every year, but I very much like the idea of muscle panic kind of have you got like functioning within like sort of a more pedagogic structure, so like being taken up by maybe a high school gym class or something. It's like all the objects within the project they kind of are a bit slippery. They're sculptures, but they're also tools and they're props, and they're meant to be used. They're not meant to be destroyed. Like they're meant to be taken care of, but also to kind of wear with use. And I can sort of imagine creating a sort of structure to be like, find yourself a scaffold, get yourself a bunch of shirts and, sew over the fronts. And I guess I've made a bit of a movement towards that, because the Non-Archival Archive, which is sort of my version of reimagining the greatest moments in sporting history through my very, queer eyes, I've opened it up and I've made a platform in which it's called Non-Archival Submissions, in which people are sort of given the prompt, what do these moments look like to you? And they can submit them, and then all they've got to do is provide like a visual description of what the images are, and they can sort of participate in this like larger archive of what the greatest moments look like to LGBTQ people, which those moments look like everything. That's the whole sort of joke of it, is that like they don't look like anything in particular because queer people are everywhere and everyone, and so yeah, that's been nice. I think beyond the project being in Copenhagen right now, if I'm able to, I'll go in September and we'll have a performance there, but I've kind of come to terms with maybe that not being possible. And yeah, I think I feel very good about this poster. It's like I was doubtful at many times throughout the process of whether I'd be able to come up with something that felt like respectful and careful about the sort of work that the participants did for the project, but also something that felt very true and in keeping with like sort of my ongoing, but sort of like the original idea of muscle panic. So it feels super lucky. Like I as I said, I doubted it many times where I was like, I don't know if I can pull this together, but I feel as though it's I somewhat do that.
Well, in a funny, unexpected moment of resonance, I completely didn't realize that I have this sitting in front of me, because this is the notepad that I use.
Do you really? You're a lavender?
My to-do list. Like, this is my weekly to-do, and I literally never even clicked until this very moment. So
I love it. They're my favorite.
This one's almost empty. It's like, but
right?
It's a good one.
Oh my gosh. And what's in your future? What are you looking towards?
Yeah, I mean, so I think this idea of like with auto theory, I'm really interested. I feel like now that this book is complete, and a lot of my kind of historicizing and contextualizing and theorizing of this idea of the auto theoretical impulse as it manifests through feminist writing and art practices, I'm wanting to now actually like apply that and take it and use it as a tool for myself to write in that mode, which has been really fun. I just finished teaching a grad course at U of T for the MVS students, and it's been, I'm just finishing grading their work, and it's been amazing to see that they've all taken really seriously as artists and curators, the 4 R's for curators, they've all taken really seriously writing auto-theoretically and auto-fictionally within the context of their lives and practices in ways that like are actually blowing me away. And so that's been really cool to see, the kind of like application of it, especially by artists. They aren't primarily necessarily writers, obviously have writing practices, as many of us do alongside our other modes, you included, looking at the poster. But yeah, so I think Thomas in the bio reading mentioned my novella that I'm working on, which is kind of riffing on Chris Krause's 1997 book, I Love Dick, in the context of East Van in the 2000s.
Which you lived in, you lived there, like in Vancouver and East Van for, how long was it?
Like 4 years.
Nice.
Just under 4 years. So not too long, but just kind of formative life periods. So, we're where you currently are now.
Yeah, exactly. East Van. Nice. Nice.
So I'm kind of thinking about auto-fictional writing, and I'm starting to think about a book on this idea of applying auto theory to ideas of class and academia and the arts, and ideas like class mobility and precarity and frontline work and futurity and labor, and just kind of diving into those fun issues. So
amazing. I love it. I look forward to it all.
Thank you. I look forward to what comes next for you. As like always, should we see if anyone has questions?
Okay. Yeah. I don't think there are any. Can you see any?
I cannot.
Well, maybe I'll ask you a question then, because I love knowing this kind of stuff, and I hope you don't find it so boring. When you're writing, like, because you're talking about writing this new sort of auto-theoretical book about I Love Dick and your life, does that writing look different to you than sort of more academic writing? Like, very practically, like, do you sit down with your lavender notepad versus a Word document, or is there a time of day in which that kind of writing feels better or is more something?
That's a beautiful question, Hazel, and frankly, I wish I had a beautiful answer. I wish I had like a different set of media for the different, because I really do like that idea and might try that. In short, the process looks very much similar. I'm at my laptop more and more lately. I've been working on writing a couple short stories, for example, and with that, I deliberately say don't be near the laptop. Like, I'll just have a book and you just kind of. I feel like often when I'm writing, I need the support of like a bed or something, or like a couch. So I'm just like, just need my whole body to be held. So
yeah. I love
which
that.
is the mode I got into with like the dissertation and PhD those days. Where, I mean, that's probably not good life advice. I think you need to just rest sometimes. But I'm like, okay, I can't physically hold my body up, so now I'll just like write and read, prompted. Held up by pillows. So it's kind of disturbing, actually.
Or I'm just imagining you in Temple Grandin's hug machine.
Oh,
it's this, for folks with autism, it tends to give them a bit more comfort, but it also reminds me of my partner and I call them tushy cradles. They're these sort of like they look like that, and it's for dogs when dogs are having surgery done on them. So they're cradled and then their bellies are on top, and they look very comfortable, but we keep saying we want to buy Reggie a tushy cradle, but I can imagine maybe you need your own tushy cradle for writing.
Yeah, I could use a tushy cradle for sure. So but I think that it does feel like starkly different writing though, and I think that's something that I've been working on, I'll say, instead of struggling with. Working on is just kind of integrating the different parts of myself, because I think we live in a world of, this is changing, but I think we used to be in a time of like specialization. So it's like, are you a writer? Are you a curator? Are you an artist? Are you a scholar? Are you, these kind of, and I've always liked just moving between the two, and not in an identity sense, but in like a practice sense of like, I like to curate, I like to make art sometimes, I like to write, and engage the scholarly mode sometimes. So I think moving away from the scholarly writing, which does tend to be, come fairly easily as far as a language that I've learned in the past decade, to move into the more fiction register has felt really, really good, but it's definitely been a whole lot of work and revision as well. So
yeah, no doubt. Yeah, I bought a typewriter recently, like an electric typewriter, but a straight up typewriter, because I want to start writing. That's when it's not on the computer, you know?
Mhm.
And I was like, and also I just like the object. It's quite beautiful. And it was at like a thrift store down the street. But yeah, kind of in a bit of a move to like, yeah, forget the sort of even ergonomics of like computer writing and just move over to another kind of, you know, typing, I guess. Yeah, it hasn't really started yet, but I'll.
I was gonna say, have you started? Yeah.
Well, I wrote a letter, which was very joyful because I always feel like, I don't know, you know, Gertrude Stein or something. Well, I guess she would handwrite them. Maybe, oh, what's his name? Philip Sparrow. Oh, I forget his name. Wonderful guy. Anyways, it just always reminds me of sort of more the golden years of correspondence, mail correspondence. Which reminds me, speaking of getting things in the mail that aren't bills or Amazon packages, there are more of these posters, and if people would like one, you can get in touch with the Dunlop. Through there are many platforms. I must see like Facebook or Instagram, and one will be mailed to you. Yeah, and that's also been very joyful. I've always loved sending mail and receiving mail, and it's nice to kind of engage in a little bit of like mail art, and to just use the postal service and system, you know, to send sort of sweaty queer poetry through the mail, which is quite nice. Yeah.
Yeah, I actually kind of wanted to give a shout out because I was thinking about when we were talking about digging holes, Linda Duvall's work in the hole, and like her project of having the residency in Saskatchewan sitting in the hole. But she's been sending postcard mail art to a lot of folks.
Oh, I love it.
Around the country. So, yeah, it's been really nice.
I love it. I'm so glad you reminded me of that work. It's so good. Yeah, Linda Duvall. Yeah. She's digging the holes and then sitting in them. And wasn't she inviting people to be in the holes with her?
Yeah, it's just one large hole, and it was a whole artist residency over the course of the summer. And artists would come and just share the space. And,
gorgeous. I love it.
Yeah.
Nice. Oh, yes, here. Thomas says, for access to the posters, you can contact T. Johnson, spelled TJONSSON, at reginalibrary.ca, which that sort of segues in a nice way to thinking about the Saskatoon Library, which if you haven't seen their logo, it connects back to what we were saying at the beginning with shapes that resemble body parts. It looks very much like a beautiful object. Yes. So the whole Saskatchewan public library system is amazing.
Yeah, and on that note, I feel like I do just want to also give a kind of autobiographical plug and thanks to the existence of public libraries and public schools and public education. I feel like growing up in Saskatchewan in the 90s, we had pretty good, relatively speaking. I mean, I was a white kid and also, but kind of in a lower income, low middle class school area. But it was, in terms of just having access to public education, public libraries, that was where, I found out about Louise Hatcher's Holes. That's where I became literate and read a lot and was taking out books all the time. So I believe that these are important spaces, especially in a world where things are becoming increasingly privatized. And, I think it's an understatement to say that private schools are a form of worsening class divides. These are my own political views. I guess these are not the views of the Dunlop Art Gallery, but yes.
I support that.
Yay for public libraries.
Yay for public libraries. Hey, Thomas.
I just wanted to jump in at that moment too, and just thank you all for, I think, being able to activate the library in a really interesting way as well. Now with the addition of your book, Lorraine, which is in our collection, and being able to promote this. And I just also wanted to thank Kia Scholar and Michelle Bazell from Canadian Sports Centre Saskatchewan and SaskSport, who've been really great in helping us devise this program and producing the posters which, yeah, is noted here. If you want to access them, just send us an email and we can certainly get one to you. I don't know if there's any other questions, but I do see we're also close to the hour. So I just wanted to thank you both. Like, it's just been, I think, a real honor to be at this table listening to you chat. And I'm really excited to see how these books continue to, publications continue to go into the world. So.
Thank you so much, Thomas.
Thank you so much for hosting us, and I deeply appreciate your support of my work. So thank you.
Yeah,
Likewise.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. So I guess we'll close here. But yeah, if you want to follow any future work here, just keep posted to our Facebook and YouTube pages as well as our website, and we'll hopefully see you again soon.
Lovely.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks everyone for tuning in. Bye. Take care.
Bye.